the reason why we're having this meeting is so that we can learn from the culturally responsive literature committee, some of the work that they have engaged in. You'll hear some of their next steps. You'll learn about the purpose of the committee, the why, and then you'll have a chance to ask questions. So one thing that I wanted to share is that every high school has a group of team members who support this work. And I wanted to share the names with you so that you are aware of who to contact at your site should you have any questions. So yeah, the 9th grade team that represents the committee is at Alhambra High School, Vanessa Luna, at Mark Keppel, Blasia Parker, and at St. Gabriel, Karen Johnston. The 10th grade team from Alhambra is Patricia Garcia, at Mark Keppel, Araceli Arrasate, at St. Gabriel, Katie Burkhart, at Independence, Juliet Wagner, and she represents 9th to 12th. The 11th grade team at Alhambra is Nicole Hasabian, at Mark Keppel, Dottie Burkhart, at St. Gabriel, Elizabeth Pondo. And the 12th grade team at Alhambra is Alistair Aiken, at Mark Keppel, Christina Carmona, and at St. Gabriel, Sarah Diaz. And so now I would like to hand it over to Dr. Cedric Gray, who will share an update and lead our committee in our roundtable.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leda. Let me just take a moment and just celebrate all the committee members who've done an awesome job as I begin to share my screen. I'm just so excited and elated and really honored to work with a group of professionals who are so very serious about not only making sure that their scholars succeed in their own classrooms, but that their scholars and their families feel a part of this tremendous work. So thank you so much for joining us. I know the hour is late, so I purposefully designed a deck that is not as long, but I do want to make sure that we cover every concern or question that you may have, and then maybe a little call to action at the end of this. And so once again, thank you so much. Let's jump in. If you can read that quote, I just give you 30 seconds to look at it. I just want to highlight one part about it. This quote is from a book I read every day, Daily Inspirations for Education by Jimmy Casas. And the part that really draws us together in a common space today is that high-performing cultures enroll families to get them to know their entire story during the process. And so that is where we've landed today, right? We have multiple families that we are serving from multiple backgrounds. All of them have their own story. And it is our responsibility and even a privilege, right, to not only know those stories, but address how we educate our scholars based upon their own experiences. Hence, we have landed here in this space today. And let me just start by, I shared this with the committee months and months ago as we started. I believe that we all have to reground ourselves around the why, because sometimes this work is really difficult. And a reminder of why we do it helps not only to inspire us, but it also helps to encourage us to move forward. So my why is this young man. You may recall this from our keynote, but I wanted to bring this up again because the student superintendent, actually his name is Cedric like mine, when I met him as a superintendent, he said he wanted to be like me. And this resonates with me because we have to create spaces for those who are often sometimes either left out or underrepresented properly so that we can help forge their futures in the ways that we can, and that is through our classrooms, right? So this is the reason we show up every day, so that scholars like Cedric can one day be like me or anyone else he wants to be. But he can't do that unless he's afforded the type of education and experiences necessary to be successful. So that's my why. This leads us to the work, right? So if I have a why and we all have a why, then the district also has one. And so I'm going to share just a 30,000 foot perspective of the district's work in equity, right, and which will lead us to why we're doing culturally responsive leadership literature committee. So the district's why, and you can find this information via your website and within your schools, is that the equity, diversity, and inclusion vision, right? So I want to give you a second to look at those, but I wanted to highlight one section as we lean into our work to this roundtable presentation today. All of this is to set the proper context, right, so that we understand why we've begun to do this work in the first place. The conclusion of this vision notes that we recognize that this living vision requires continual learning, growth, change, hard work, and vigilance in order to actually realize and sustain this work. And so that real life, that continual learning, that growth, change, and hard work is what this committee has been doing over the last few months. As a matter of fact, the district's vision is not something that was just determined. We're in year 2, as you can see, of a 3-year strategic plan to include equitable practices within our school district for students who are at this point may be underrepresented. So as you can see, year 1 was establishing the EDI task force and building a shared understanding around racial literacy, which is where the levels were set in 21-22. And then conversations were begun district-wide about this work, about equity, diversity, inclusion within our system here in Alhambra. Year 2 is where we are now, where the vision sought to increase EDI literacy of our leadership, teachers, staff members, students, and parents. This is where the work of the committee is anchored, right there, to increase EDI literacy of all those stakeholders who are involved in our daily growth of our scholars, and then begin to normalize conversations around equity, diversity, inclusion within our system. And then ultimately, number 4, to engage the voice of untapped families and students within our systems. What we've been discussing as a committee, and the committee members will share in just a few moments, is that we want to make sure all voices are heard and all members of our community have an opportunity to play a part in this tremendous work. All right, so what is this tremendous work? Well, I had a why to remind myself of why I get up every day, even though those days are tougher than others. The district has a why, that is that it wants to serve the greater community, all members of its community. And then the culturally responsive literature committee also established a why, right? And so the why really was an answer and a response to the question Zaretta Hammond asked. All curriculum, she says, is culturally responsive. The question is, to whose culture is it responding? Right? A powerful moment when we were discussing this in our group. We really had to come to grips with the fact that, yes, we are being culturally responsive, but how and to whose culture is really being emphasized in our work. And I'm trying not to steal thunder from the committee members, as I know I see some heads nodding that they'll give a chance to share. So this is the why. We walked into the space saying to ourselves, who are we leaving out? And why are we leaving them out? How can we include all scholars in this work? to make sure that we are culturally responsive to them and to their families and to their needs. All right, so that was the why. The how, I apologize, the what, okay, so the what. So we were all charged with certain objectives, and I will pause a moment here and let you look at those. But I'll highlight just some of the highlighted words. So we just talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing. So first and foremost, the creation of an equity framework. And we'll talk about, that's the meat of what we've been doing right now. And then to understand criticality and learning how to implement it in the classroom. This criticality, as you'll learn, is a phrase that has been developed by Dr. Goldie Muhammad and the work that she's been doing. It really means to be able to examine texts in a critical manner, right? And this critical manner doesn't mean it doesn't have has a positive connotation. Is where do I see, when scholars are reading, where do they see themselves in the work? So understanding that criticality is important when we're talking about instructional practices and we're talking about cultural norms. Another objective that we have is to evaluate novels and texts. And so that means to identify them, those novels that all scholars can see reflective of themselves, as well as text. And that would include short essays, etc. But we have a two-step process, right? So we have to choose these novels and texts, and then we have to develop the system to evaluate them in this cultural framework. And then learning new instructional strategies, right? So those who are high impact instructional strategies, those that bear a rigor, right? So closed format, probing questions, when students engage in critical thinking and listening skills. And so all of those instructional strategies, we have begun to and will continue to identify those that help and support culturally responsive literature. And then developing essay prompts, we're working on that. We've begun that work as well. And then the implementation of fidelity and monitoring, right? So once with all this work is done, we would need to be able to assist others and walk into classrooms and say, what are we looking for to make sure these things are being done? How do we improve upon them if they are not? All right. And so the how. So we've talked about the why and our drive for providing an equitable practice for our scholars. Then we talked about the what, and those are objectives. We are specific objectives we've been charged to meet. And now it's the how. So the how is cultivating genius. This text was provided to us by district leadership, and it's the work of Goldie Muhammad. And so any of you all who are familiar with any sort of culturally responsive work know that she's done a phenomenal job of building an equity framework around 5 pursuits, which I'll allow ask the committee to expound upon a little bit more. But for purposes of our time together and making sure that I don't overtalk you, we'll dive a little bit deeper into this as we have this discussion. But this is a very rich text. I mean, it helped us examine our own practices as professionals, as educators, and then helped us reflect on how we can support others doing that as well. It all began with, for Dr. Muhammad guided us through visioning. And so the preamble, as she states it, as you can see, was a statement of intention, right? And so the committee itself gathered in some of our earlier sessions together and developed a preamble. And here it is. I think you have heard some of this. I see committee members smiling. We are so excited each time that we meet that we actually speak our preamble, right? So we remind ourselves of all of the preambles. What's inside of it is the why, the who, the how, and the what, all of that captured in the preamble. So we recite this together as we begin our work. And I won't do it now. I won't ask us to do it now for the sake of time, but just so you know, this is the vision statement that drives us, our mantra, if you would. And so where are we now? We are working now. The committee's work, I'm saying this purposefully, is under construction, right? So we haven't completed this. We have plans to complete it. We have a timeline in place, but we developed a theory of action to help guide our work. This is the strategic approach to building an equity framework, along with the supplemental materials that must go along with it. So the preamble and vision statement you have seen has been developed. We are now developing and working on beliefs and norms that go along with our work and our theory of action. There are certain beliefs that you have to, that espouse this work, right? So certain things that you believe not only about your scholars, but you believe about your own personal practice as a teacher. And then along with that, instructional practices, promising practices, those that we would recommend you use when guiding scholars through culturally responsive literature work. And then the development of look-fors, right? So when you go into classrooms, we want to be able to identify certain practices, and if those practices don't exist, we want to be able to support those so that they are, right? And so even the development of a rubric, right? So what's a high level, high performing instructional practice at its best, and those who are not necessarily at its best, but need some improvement? That's what look-fors help us establish. All right, I feel like I have talked so very much, and I tell the committee this all the time. And so they get on to me because I could go on and on, but they get on to me to keep going. But I'm going to pause at this point so that the committee members who are present can not only identify themselves and introduce themselves, but also, if you would, committee, share a little bit about your why and some of your what, right? Why you're doing this work, and the what, and that is how you've contributed to it thus far. I'll pause and let you jump in, and I'll leave my screen up though, if that works for you. I see Dorothy, and so I'm gonna let you start, if you would, ma'am. Introduce yourself, where school, and then talk a little bit about your why and your how.
Okay, hi. I teach at Marquette High School. I teach all juniors this year, so American Literature, and the AP class, the AP language course. My why has always been story based. I feel like all of my students have a story, and part of what I do as an English language arts teacher is give them the tools and the space to tell their story. But what I've noticed is in the pieces that in the model texts, in the texts that we teach as exemplary storytelling, they haven't had enough opportunity to really see themselves in those stories. So it's always been something that I've tried to rectify kind of on my own within the four walls of my own classroom, by bringing in texts and allowing space for a diversity of stories. But I've been eager for the district to take on the challenge of really reframing how we select texts and why we select texts. So it's been in the back of my mind and in the front of my teaching, I think, my entire career. So that's my why. I want my students to be seen, and I want them to feel seen. The how and what, it's hard. I think for me, the how currently that has been most affected by the work that we've been doing with Dr. Gray is these four, Five, including joy. What do we call them? They're like modes of thinking. I don't even have, I forget what exactly she talked,
Pursuits,
like pursuits.
pursuits
There
or
it is.
goals. That's it. You got it. You got it.
There it is. I think those are the things that kind of stick with me in my own teaching right now, is like, I'm constantly, every time I think about doing something, those are at the forefront of the questions that I'm asking. How is this going to help my students learn identity, learn skills, explore intellect, think critically and ask questions and challenge the community that they live in and are thinking in? And then how is it going to bring them joy? So I think for me, that's the how that has been most affected by the work that we have done. I don't know if I did what I was supposed to do, but that's me.
You did it. You did it. Can you tell one way you've contributed to the work?
Like contributed to the work, like within my classroom, or the work
within the
community,
committee,
within the committee.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have I think I participate in the conversation. I put myself into the conversation, and I am not afraid to think, and not afraid to be challenged by what I'm thinking about.
Absolutely.
Open-minded, I guess. Open-minded.
That's it. Thank you. The committee knows the rules. We can either volunteer or, like Blazer, be voluntold.
I knew it. No. Thank you, Dr. Cedric and Dottie. Hello, everyone. I'm Blazer Parker. I'm an English teacher at Mark Keppel High School. I teach primarily 9th and 10th, but I've also taught upper grade levels at LAUSD. I think my why is pretty straightforward. I've always struggled with the canon and seeing my own self represented in the canon as a student throughout high school, and as someone who pursued a degree in English. So I've always had that curiosity and concern and questioning for the way in which people who aren't telling their stories, as Dottie said, are being represented by a dominant majority, and how that can be harmful, how that can be static, how that can be flattening to their dignity, to their sense of self and identity in the world. So because of that, I was very excited when this opportunity came about to really immerse myself amongst others and really get to the why, which is what Dr. Cedric is saying. I also realized that the ability to provide students with stories is powerful. Language is powerful, and it can be used to create and construct, or it can be used to destroy. So I think that allowing this opportunity with the district to really delve into literary diversity, literary stories, literary presence, will allow students to really see themselves and be proud of themselves, and see others who aren't like them, and allow for that space of understanding. How, or what was the other one, Dr. Cedric?
That's it. How have you contributed to our group?
I think showing up, checking my privileges, being mindful and open to everyone's experiences, enjoying, the sense of humor that Dr. Cedric and others bring, and just being excited about this.
Good, thank you.
I'll go next.
Sarah, thank you. Jump
Hi.
in.
I'm Sarah. I am at San Gabriel High School. I teach 9th and 10th also in journalism. This is my first year at the school and district, but I have been at a couple other districts before. This is my 5th year teaching. I am excited to be a part of this committee. I also joined late, so I have a little bit of a different perspective, but I am happy to be involved now at this point. But my why, I guess, is the combination of what both of my other committee members have said. I have a distinct memory of not reading any text from a Latina woman, which is how I identify, until I was a sophomore in undergrad. And I remember feeling exactly the way Dottie is demonstrating, really frustrated and surprised. And the feeling that I got when I finally read that text was a feeling that I had not yet been given in school, that I, when I decided to become a teacher, wanted to give to other students, or to give to my students at a much younger age and hopefully transform the trajectory of their learning environment and their learning capacity and how they see themselves. So I don't know that I have all the words to articulate the ways in which that even has affected me, but I want them to be affected by it positively with this change. But I know that I want to be involved in it, and I want to participate actively instead of just doing what has been done before. So I'm excited to, like I said, be involved. My how, again, I started late. So I think jumping in and being willing to kind of just try to keep pace with everybody else has been also out of my norm. I'm a little bit more reserved. So I think challenging myself to be a little bit more vulnerable in that way is like a good challenge for me also. Yeah, I think, did I miss anything else?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know Elizabeth is picking up kids, and she's on the call but may not be able to jump. Oh, well, maybe Elizabeth?
I can jump in right now because I am
Okay.
going to get the kiddos in the car pretty soon, so it'll be hard to have a clear thought. So I'm Elizabeth Hondo. I teach at San Gabriel High School, and I teach American literature and also my second language learners. And teaching American literature revealed to me the source of text is widely limited. And so I wanted to give that course a facelift and make sure that the history through literature was being told through those primary sources, through those individuals that don't have voice in most of our texts in our English classes. And that has been a challenge for me because it is not readily available. So the committee work was really purposeful in that I could do that work alongside others. So that way I could do better work in that American literature course. But also what Dottie said, and the representation of people is so limited, and there's so much out there to explore. Recently, our society is reckoning with all of that, and I have understood where my privilege is and how to exercise that better in the classroom. And so that's what brought me to this work.
Awesome.
And then what is the how?
Yep.
How are we?
How have you contributed to the work?
How have I contributed to the work?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, every meeting it is definitely reflecting and thinking and always taking action, I think, with what we are learning. The texts have been so helpful in grounding us so that our opinions are not convoluted with experience and with what we have to do for students. So I feel like just coming to understanding one another's perspective is part of our journey. And I feel like that has been the best learning experience for us.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I'm looking to see. I think that is everyone from the committee represented on the call today. So I want to pause then now and sort of open it up for Q&A, but let me just make this one statement. This may be provocative, but I want us to fully understand this why. Why do we talk about the why? It's really mainly based on the fact that if there are multiple cultures represented in our classroom, we are responsible for making sure every one of those scholars succeed. And sometimes that means adjusting your practice and your perspective to see things from their lens. And that's what this work is really about, because we are responsible for making sure the next generation is well educated, productive, for multiple reasons. If nothing else, if you just want to be able to sit in your rocking chair at age 65 or whenever that is, and be satisfied with that you've done a good work for the citizens in your community, then this is the why. This is what it boils down to. It is absolutely our responsibility. And it's what we remind ourselves of in the committee all the time, right? So no matter if the background of the scholar in your classroom matches yours or not, it is your responsibility to get to know them and get to know how they think, how they learn, how they could be the best version of themselves. And that means reaching outside of yourselves. That means being uncomfortable with things, right? We talk about that a lot in the committee. So I'm gonna pause and make sure that we have some time for Q&A with anyone who's on. All right, I see Dr. Nino, hand raised. Go on, my brother, tell us, ask us.
Dr. Gray, when you said at the beginning that we register families,
Yes.
it was powerful when I heard you say that. And then I hear Blasia finding herself in the discourse of teaching and learning, right? And it reminded me of a book that I read by Pedro Noguera, that he says when we drive, he tells a story of he was driving somewhere in New York, and he looked to the side of the street and he see these people working on the side of the roads, especially this, they have uniforms. There's a sense of invisibility to them. You just drive by them and they don't have a face. They have this group of, he says that when we do not stop to acknowledge the entire child, culture and all, we treat them in the same way, with a sense of invisibility, and the quieter you are, the less I have to do. And in our case, it sounds like you have a team of educators that you're not driving by, are you seeking to see details, are you seeking to see the deeper who are you? Because there's a who are you that I could answer really quickly. I'm Nino Collado and this is who I am. But you want to know who I am. And it sounds like that's what you're pursuing, knowing that it's hard to ever get there, but it sounds like we're on the road. So I just want to commend you, sir, and the group of educators that are in this team.
It's an awesome team, brother. Thank you.
Dr. Gray, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What might this work look like when it's back at the sites with the respective team members who are learning, who are studying, who are building synergy, who are creating this framework? How might that be shared with their team members back at their sites?
Awesome. Oh, a wonderful question, Dr. Lilly. In a very concrete way, what the committee desires to create is a way to teach students who have up to this point been part of the big instructional gap, right? Literally development of instructional practices, selection of texts that look like the kids who are reading them, and then appropriately addressing the assessment, the data from assessment, right? So it's on my humble estimation here, what we're looking at is a way to do school better, right? To address all the needs of all the scholars in the classrooms. And so I'm obviously an African-American male. 80% of the teachers across our country now are white female. There's an identity challenge there. White female teachers don't know young Black males well enough to teach them from a perspective of a young Black male. So now we are introducing a way to do that. Identification of texts that are culturally responsive, identification and practice of instructional practices that are also culturally responsive, and then using assessment data, right, and feedback to adjust our instructional practices, a very concrete way to look at culturally responsive literature.
Cedric, I wonder if I'd like to open it up for any of your committee members to add to your response of what this would look like back on the sites based on being a practitioner at the sites.
Well, I don't want to jump in before anybody else, but it doesn't sound like anyone else is going to jump in. I just hope, I hope for very real conversations. I feel like that's what's really needed in my department in particular here at Keppel. We have talked a lot about the achievement gap. We've talked a lot about some of the data, and we've thought about what that implies about teaching and learning. But I think what Dr. Gray just said, like 80% of teachers are white women who don't have the tools necessarily inherently to connect with our students of color, and our male students of color maybe in particular. And this really is like personal for me. So I need tools. I want to learn how to do that. And I feel like just a space where we can admit to each other that we don't have all the answers, and that there are people who can help us get there. And there are tools. The rubric that maybe we will end up creating is a tool that we can use to really help each other open our classrooms and just be like humble enough to admit that there's a problem, and that we can help each other to a solution.
I do have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
And my question is about how will we measure our success? So what does that look like? What is our metric? If there's a metric, how do we know we're successful? How do we know it worked, I guess?
Dr. Gray, can I step in and then you can follow?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, go right ahead, please.
All right, thank you. So at Creative Leadership Solutions, we're always looking for our evidence of impact. Every proposal, every contract that goes out the door, including Alhambra, we are, as educators, as educational leaders, we're like, okay, we're going to go in and do this work. At the end of the day, what are we going to look for results? And at this point, Dr. Lilly, with the work that we're doing with Dr. Gray, we have not gotten to that point. So Dr. Gray is, the current contract is for him to facilitate the committee and to create these resources. And then the last step is for implementation support. So what I foresee is in the mid-spring is us coming together with Dr. Gray, you, if Marissa's back, which will be awesome, coming back together and saying, okay, we've created all these tools, but what we know as professional learning facilitators is we can create the tools. However, we need to support implementation. Otherwise, we just hand over resources, and we hope, which is on a strategy, we hope that they will be embedded in the culture. So what I recommended to Marissa before she left for medical leave is that we are very intentional about implementation support so that all this hard work of the committee does not die, really, that we can implement, support. How does this impact teaching? How does it impact leadership? How does it impact each school, the whole district? And how can we support that? So that's going to be conversations that we have mid-spring so that we can be very strategic on looking at, as these tools roll out, the prompts, the rubric, the assessments, the strategies. How can we monitor what we expect and monitor impact, evidence of impact on student learning? So that's a long-winded answer to that has not yet been determined, but it's on our radar because we value that and we know it's incredibly important. So.
Thank you for that.
Dr. Gray, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
It's an excellent response and actually an excellent question, especially from you, Dr. Lilly, from the district's perspective, because as a superintendent, we're always thinking about, so we would love to engage in this matter, but how do we know it's the 4 PLC questions, right? So everything's driven that way. What do we want our teachers to do and how do we know that they're doing it? So absolutely, and observation support, coaching support, being able to observe teaching strategies in practice, and then after some in-depth conversation, we connect those dots to how do we see and what do we look for to see that student achievement is being impacted.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen.
Right. Thank you, Cedric. So I think the next phase of this work will honestly be implementation support. How do we support leaders and supporting their teachers in implementing this work? What are the indicators that we're looking for evidence of impact? And honestly, from my perspective as a district administrator, implementing work, curriculum work that I did before I joined officially our Creative Leadership Solutions, after we implement it, I recommend let's pilot it. I mean, all this is new. So let's come back, let's be strategic. And excuse me. Let's be strategic and we're going to implement it. Let's calendar coming back together December 2023. What's working, what's not working, what revisions do we need to do? Okay, let's put that forward for spring 2024. And again, come back at the end of spring 2024 and kind of consider 23-24 as a pilot for all the hard work that's been done this year, and make some revisions if necessary from practitioners, and then officially launch for the new school year based on practitioners' implementation, leaders' implementation, what worked, what didn't work. I highly recommend we do that as we plan in the spring. Right now, the deliverables, just so everyone's very clear, are the takeaways that Dr. Gray mentioned at the beginning of the call. They're going to create writing prompts, share strategies. Those are the clear deliverables. However, the evidence of impact will come when we truly implement all those deliverables.
I guess another question from the district perspective and the site administrative perspective. How do we learn about all the work, learn about the artifacts, learn about sort of the sequence, the plans, the rubrics, the framework, all of that, so that we can begin to share it with other members of our team, and then potentially even articulate across the 3 high schools and so on. I know that we have a couple of principals here. I don't know if you want to chime in.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Hi.
Thanks, Lily. Hi, I'm Debbie Stone. I'm principal at San Gabriel High School, and I know our time, I don't know how much time we afforded for this, so I don't want to keep us later than what we promised people. But my thought being in what Lily was saying, maybe as site admin team, understanding that piece I think is critical, and I'm open to us with Lily maybe meeting or having that conversation to kind of front load our understanding so that we can then lead it. I think it's really important we all get on the same page. And I'm sorry for not knowing more than what I think I need to know about all of this work, so my apologies. But my other piece would be department chairs and really what their role is and how do they play a part. So I know that's more than what we can handle right now in this winding down of this time, but just my thoughts. And I'm very excited about the work. I think it's very important work. I think it needs to be centered in front of us. And as a principal at San Gabriel High School and the principal that's on, we all, the three principals, we talk often and we're all very committed to this work. So I think I speak on the parts of the three principals of the comprehensive high schools, but I don't want to speak for them. But I do know it's important to us. So us wanting to know more about this work and getting some time so that we can better understand would be great.
Excellent. And I will just really briefly share, the committee had begun some conversation about how to sort of spread the word, right? So a lot of great work going forward. We have some deliverables as Lisa's already articulated and that we demonstrated through our objectives. The next step is, right, sort of taking the show on the road.
Right.
And so we've begun those conversations with anticipation of, we meet again in January and then in March. March was the time that the committee decided that we were going to try to pull it all together and figure out who needs to know what, when, and then what do we do next. So great. Thank you for that.
I would like to piggyback on what Dr. Gray was adding. When I implemented work in my urban, very large school district in Albuquerque Public Schools, I ended up creating, I was one of you on the committee, I ended up creating a leader's version of the work. What do leaders need to know and be able to do to support this work and advocate for the implementation and spearhead it? So I could see leaders now being department heads, vice principals, admin, anyone who's going to be the cheerleader that makes this happen. First is the teacher, second is the leader. So I would encourage the committee that in those March dates to think about a leader's version that is, 30-foot view. What do I need to know to be able to make this work and be successful in my building? Tell me what I need to do. Give me a checklist. So just a strategy that I used in a large urban setting that helped us get ahead of the game with successful implementation.
I think, we can, I think through the work of the spring, having a component of sharing the work with the admin and talking about rollout and implementation with success, who needs to know what they need to know, when they need to know it, all of those pieces that come along with just a communication plan and expectations. I'm particularly excited that in this meeting here in this space, I would say almost half of the participants are either district admin or site admin in some capacity. So there is genuine interest and enthusiasm for the work. It's very well received from the district administration and site administration. We just need to think through the plan to hand it off to the site. So it does take off with intentionality, with thoughtfulness, and with a sense of commitment to the work. So unless there are any other questions, I would really like to thank the committee for being here, for sharing. Your whys are so inspirational. And, I leave here, so honored for this short period of time, lead this work with you, because I feel like just from what you said at the beginning of the meeting, I understand you as a teacher leader, and I thank you for sharing and for giving of yourself in that way. Personally, I want to thank Dr. Gray, who always debriefs after he spends 2 days in Alhambra with me, and it's always a pleasure and a joy to debrief with him, and he's always so enthusiastic and excited, and he arrives with so much energy and he leaves with, I think, even more energy. So the work at Alhambra really inspires him and charges his battery. And for everyone else who came to listen, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your evening, and if we don't see each other again, happy holidays, and we'll see each other in the new year. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.